My initial thoughts on the reaction of Pope Francis. I think my initial reaction is probably much like the rest of the world. I was immediately taken by the great humility that was very evident when he came out of the balcony at St. Peter's. His humility was just radiating forth from him. Like the rest of the world, I think I was deeply moved by that moment of silence. And just watching on TV, you could hear a pin drop, it seemed, in all of St. Peter's Square. So I think I was very moved in those first moments of finding out who the new Pope was by his humility, by the silence that was so prevalent. And I really think we're in for a very historic moment in the life of the Church. I always think back to Pope John Paul II when I was in the seminary, when I was in college. He was very influential in my own life. His readings really guided how I understood our Lord, how I understood the Church. And his writings and everything about him influenced my life in so many ways. And in so many ways, he was a pope of a lot of firsts, right? So he was the first non-Italian pope to be elected in 400 years. He was the first pope to travel as much in the world as he did. He was the first pope to be seen by, I forget the numbers of millions of people that saw him in person, first pope to enter into a mosque. So he was just the first pope of many things. And I think with this pope, I didn't know how we could really top a pope who did so much for the first time. But I do think we're in for a transformational moment. We know now he's the first Latin American pope, which is, I think, a great blessing for the Church. He's the first Jesuit pope ever, which is quite a shock. The first non-European pope in 1,200 years. So just the beginning of his papacy really shows a great historic moment of transformation for the papacy. And I'm extremely excited. I think, not knowing much about him, Pope Benedict, when he got elected, I felt I knew a lot about him. I've been reading him for years. So I think I had some expectations of what would be in store. Not knowing who Pope Francis was before I heard Pope Francis. But now looking into him, I think what really stands out is two things that I think are really important. I told our college students this recently. In American life, we tend to be very polarized. We see everything through political lens. We see everything through how this group is in contrast to this group. And sometimes in the Church, this really has kind of sunk in, right? So you have the social justice Catholics, and then you have the doctrinal Catholics on the other side. And I think what this Pope really has the great ability to do, and it's because he's been doing it for so many years as a bishop, is he really takes both of those things, those aspects of the Church, those two dimensions of the Church, and he isn't afraid to show forth the fullness of either of those dimensions. We know that justice is an important issue for him, right? He's obviously been a man devoted to the poor for years and years. We know all the stories now about, as a bishop, giving up the bishop's mansion, riding to work on the subway, or the bus, I'm sorry. Everyone is so impressed, and his deep love that he has for the poor. And so that justice element that's so important in our Church, he really has been living that and espousing that for so long. And at the same time, he's been so strong on the doctrinal aspects of our faith. We know the positions the stances he's taken against abortion, against, obviously, same-sex marriage, for traditional marriage. And so he's been really unafraid to also hold those strong moral positions. Pope Benedict wrote that wonderful encyclical not too long ago, Charity and Truth. And I think that really is what Pope Francis embraces. He embraces charity. He knows what it means to be a disciple of Christ and to be for the poor. And he also radically knows what it means to be a man for truth, a man to be for the doctrine of our Holy Catholic Church. And he's not like a lot of other Catholics. He doesn't kind of gravitate towards one to the detriment of the other. But he really embraces the fullness of our faith. And so I think we could be in for a potentially transformative moment in the life of the Church. Modern papal history has spanned a lot of different genres, right? We had a pope that was pope for a month, and then we had a pope that was pope for 20-something years. So I think it's going to be very interesting to discern and discover where the Spirit's leading the Church, and where Pope Francis leads our Church. I'm excited. It is going to be transformative, and it is going to be historic. So pray for him, because we need his leadership and guidance. Those are my initial thoughts on Pope Francis.